Splatoon weapon kits are very important to this game as they can essentially make or break a weapon. A lot of times though, when we think of weapon kits, because of the way it's worded, we often think about the sub and the special and not necessarily the main weapon, which can lead to a lot of misconceptions about how good a weapon truly is. It's easy to make this mistake, and I know quite a few people who do this as well, so let's talk about it. In this video, we'll go over a few examples of weapons in Splatoon 3 that really demonstrate the concept of why the whole weapon kit matters, as sort of a learning experience for me, and also a way of demonstrating an idea about this game to you. Our first topic involves a currently very relevant weapon, being the NZAP 85. We don't need to dwell over it much, as you've probably already heard enough of this thing, but in short, this weapon's special output is ridiculous. Because of the way Tacticooler works, Zap can essentially have permanent cooler up, enabling the entire team to be more aggressive and challenge more space constantly, which is very strong right now. So strong, in fact, that not running this weapon on your team is a literal disadvantage in an environment where ballpoint splatling is so strong. When watching Tacticooler games and messing around with Zap myself, I remembered a weapon I hadn't thought about in a long time, the Dynamo Roller. At a surface level, it seems like Zap and Dynamo do very similar things. Their special output is crazy good, their paint is pretty close to equal, they both have Tacticooler, and they can both cycle Tacticooler. So why does nobody even dare to touch the Dynamo Roller at high level, even if it can do a very similar job to NZAP? First, let's talk about the advantages Dynamo has over Zap, and then let's talk about the disadvantages. For starters, Dynamo Roller is massive, as its horizontal flicks threaten some of the most area in the entire game, as well as painting a very good amount. It's very strong on ledges, and it can hit people from angles that most weapons couldn't even dream of hitting. It has really great range, with its horizontal flick going about as far as Nautilus shots, and its vertical flick practically matching range values with Jet Squelcher. On top of that, it's capable of a one-shot, just like every other roller weapon, giving it a very threatening option up close. This all might seem good, but honestly that's about it for Dynamo. This thing is really ink hungry. You get 5 roller flicks out of your ink tank without any gear, which is barely enough to charge special all the way in the training room. In an actual match, when you have 3 other teammates who are also painting the map, you're often not going to get your special within 5 shots. The current gear meta for Dynamo Roller also only gives you 6 shots total anyways, so there's really not too much leeway in getting your special. On top of that, it's incredibly slow, having one of the slowest kill times in the entire game, and its one-shot radius with the horizontal flick only extends to around here. You know what can kill consistently and like twice as fast from this range? You guessed it, NZAP. Oh, and by the way, Dynamo is a heavyweight weapon, which essentially makes it 10% slower than most other weapons in the game, and nearly 20% slower than the lightweight NZAP. There's more to talk about here, like paint consistency and its god-awful vertical flick, but you get the idea. Dynamo right now is just a terrible weapon. NZAP, on the other hand, has so many advantages over Dynamo Roller outside of just the comparable stuff. Being a short-range shooter, it is one of the most mobile weapons in the game, having very good frame data as well as great painting capabilities. This thing's paint coverage is genuinely pretty crazy, and it doesn't suffer from the same issue Dynamo does with its paint, as Zap is much more consistent and controllable, being a short-range shooter. Looking at both its mobility and paint together, it's easy to see why Zap is so good, not just as a main weapon, but with Tacticooler and in this metagame. Its mobility and its paint means it can disengage and then engage freely, paint whatever corner of the map it wants to get cooler, and then jump right back into the fight without much trouble. On top of this, NZAP isn't limited to just supporting its team. This thing can fight. It outmaneuvers, outpaints, and out-DPSs most weapons in this game, especially Dynamo Roller, even with having a 4-shot. To basically kick the weapon while it's down, Dynamo has 190p Tacticooler and Zap has 180p for whatever fucking reason, and also Zap has a top-tier sub-weapon in Suction Bomb, which while not being as good as it was in Splatoon 2, at least gives Zap another option to deal object damage while Dynamo is stuck with Sprinkler. Looking at all the comparisons between these two weapons, it's clear as day which one is better. It's really unfortunate to see Dynamo in such a rough spot, but who knows, it might get a good kit soon. Eventually. One day. The next example on the list is a little bit more niche, but still very applicable to Splatoon 3. It's a weapon we pretty much haven't seen at all, being the Glugadoolies. When this game came out, I genuinely thought this thing was going to be a monster, seeing as a pretty similar weapon in Kensa 52 Gal, with almost the same kit, was literally top 1 best weapon in Splatoon 2, and there have been times where double and even triple K52 has worked, which is crazy. In fact, Glugas are pretty much competing with the 52 and 96 gals in this game, yet both of them are consistently better, despite both of their specials being worse than Glugas. So why is that? Well, let's look at each of these weapons individually. To start, 52 gal is a stupid good main weapon. It's a middleweight, short-range shooter with good painting capabilities, and its use of splash wall can make it really difficult to challenge. It kills extremely fast, has good range for its weapon type, and has great overall synergy with its Killer Whale 5.1. All of this comes together to make a weapon that can take space really well, and keep that space just as effectively, all while being extremely difficult to take 1v1s with since it can protect itself and kill you faster than most weapons in the game. Its biggest and most exploitable weakness is its really bad shot spread, but playing around Splash Wall can make it less punishable. 96 cal is a very similar main weapon with much more range and, in turn, more exaggerated weaknesses, but still with a fast 2-shot kill time and heavy benefit from Splash Wall. 96 Deco, the kit that matters, also comes with Kraken Royale, which isn't the greatest special, but it works pretty well on 96, especially for the reasons you'd want to use Kraken. While it also suffers from shot spread and the kit has overall more inconsistency than 52, it's still able to play around its range very well to cut down on this issue. Glugas are very similar to these two weapons, as a lot of the design philosophy used for Glugas comes straight from 52 and 96. The Glugadoolies also have a 2-shot, and an accurate one at that, although you need to be standing completely still after a dodge roll for the 2-shot to come out. Using the other firing mode is an option, but it's pretty inaccurate with a poor fire rate and is only a 3-shot. So Glugas are generally very reliant on their dodge roll firing mode to deal damage, which greatly hinders its mobility. Besides their paint being generally worse and their ink efficiency being pretty poor, Gluga's method of attacking is mainly what holds it back, as 52 and 96 don't have to stand completely still to get a good kill time. Also, Gluga has Booyah Bomb, a special which is widely considered to be within the top 5 best special weapons, and we already know Wall plus Booyah is a very strong combo, so really the only thing holding this kit back is the main weapon. While not nearly as severe a difference as NZAP and Dynamo, this goes to show that even with a better sub and special combination, the main weapon can make the difference between viable and unviable. Glugas are very inconsistent weapons, and even when they get access to their 2-shot, they're forced to stand completely still in order to have it, which is just too exploitable of a weakness to work even with an amazing kit. The last two examples I gave were, to a similar extent, faults of the main weapon. The Sblast 92, however, is pretty much the opposite story. This thing is really good right now, and at first glance it might not look like that at all. It comes with Sprinkler and Reef Slider, which are definitely among some of the worst subs and specials in the game, but the Sblast itself is on a whole different level. This main weapon is insanely good, and despite having the worst sub and special combo of the blasters, it pretty much completely invalidates all but one of them due to the absurd strengths of the main weapon. So why is that? Well, Sblast pretty much gets rid of one of the biggest problems with the blaster class, being their set range. If you want to hit indirects and use your blast radius, you always have to be a certain distance away from where you're shooting at. Sblast has both a short range and long range firing mode, meaning it can excel in short range encounters like Luna Blaster, and can threaten a one-shot from a long distance like Range Blaster. On top of that, Sblast has more range in its long range mode than Range Blaster does, and it also has perfect jump accuracy with its long range mode, which is normally another massive weakness of the blasters. Sblast can consistently and reliably take close range encounters like this with its short range mode, use the insane speed of the long range mode to hit pretty much safe one-shots, and even use a combination of both modes when the short range mode no longer reaches the opponent to threaten even more distances. This main weapon is incredibly versatile, and despite its pretty lackluster sub and special, it's still considered to be a very high tier weapon by many and easily the best blaster in the game right now. This is pretty much the opposite situation from the Dynamo Roller and the Glugadoolies. While their sub and special combinations are good, especially Glugas, the main weapon being generally outclassed or outperformed is what's holding them back, whereas with the Sblast, it's actually the main weapon being held back by its sub and special instead. This sort of dynamic is also seen in another prominent high tier threat which does very similar things to Sblast, being the Dark Tetradoolies. It also happens to be the case that both Tetris and Sblast lean very heavily into quick respawn builds, as they don't get too much value out of the rest of their kit, so they play into QR. What I'm really getting at here is that the whole weapon kit matters in this game. If you just look at Sblast and see Sprinkler and Reef Slider, you're likely going to think the whole weapon is bad, which is exactly what happened when its kit was revealed around a month ago. If you look at Glugadoolies and have experience with Splatoon 2, you'd probably think they're super strong, which is exactly what I and many others thought at the start of Splatoon 3. If you look at the current meta of the game and see what weapons are dominating, it's easy to think that Dynamo might actually work. In short, you need to look at the entire weapon, and not just its main sub and special, but also its points for special and even some less obvious things like matchup charts, team synergy, and more. Just like any other competitive game, there's a lot that goes into understanding Splatoon and a lot that determines viability. We as a community tend to do things like looking at a weapon or gear ability in a vacuum, and not necessarily looking at it in the Splatoon environment being a team game. Stuff like this, which is caused by only looking at something from a base perspective, is what causes confusion and debate in this game. And if we just look a little longer and maybe seek out other perspectives from other players, who knows what we might find out? Maybe Luna Blaster Neo isn't that bad, or maybe Splatana Stamper is still top 5. Just remember, there's so much more to this game than just your sub and special.